The Terminator is one of the best weapons in Hypixel Skyblock. With 310 base damage, 50 strength and 250% crit damage, not to mention the plus 40% bonus attack speed and the 0.5 second shot cooldown. An incredibly powerful weapon that shoots 3 arrows at once, and being a shortbow, naturally it is the archer's #1 choice. Having said that, it does have its drawbacks. One of them being that it divides your crit chance by 4, and if you're not getting critical hits, then there's not really any point in using the weapon. Now this can be rectified by using a power stone like Fortuitous that gives you a lot of base crit chance. However, you do forfeit massive damage buffs that you could get with other power stones. But ultimately, the worst hurdle that people face when trying to get a Terminator is simply the fact that they have to reach Enderman Slayer 7 to be able to use or craft it. And for those established players, it doesn't really seem like that big of an issue. However, for a lot of new players, it does seem like a bit of an uphill battle. Now, there's absolutely alternatives to a Terminator, which is why today I thought it'd be interesting if we test some budget or knockoff Terminator setups to see how close they actually come to the actual thing. And maybe, just maybe, save you a bit of coins as well in the process. However, I will say the Terminator is really cheap at the moment, compared to what it used to be just at the beginning of the year. Albeit none of this will matter if you don't have Enderman Slayer 7. So let's get into it. Before we go any further, if you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS as it gets yourself 5% off. You should join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We offer slayers and dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. Also, if you're not already, you should subscribe to the channel. Now, the first thing we have to consider is the weapon. Now, there's tons and tons and tons of different variations of bows in Hypixel Skyblock. Now, which one comes the closest? Now, the Spirit Shortbow isn't a bad option, however, it isn't the next best thing. The debate is more going to be between the Mosquito Shortbow and, of course, the Terminator's predecessor in the Juju Shortbow. Now, if we have a quick look at a base Mosquito shortbow with nothing on it, we can see it gives us plus 251 damage, plus 151 strength, plus 39% crit damage, plus 20 vitality on a 0.5 second shot cooldown. Its left click ability also means that we shoot an enhanced shot. The shot deals plus 19% damage and heals you for 2 times the mana spent. If we take a look at the Juju Shortbow, it has more base damage at plus 310. It gives us plus 40 strength, plus 10% crit chance, plus 110% crit damage on a 0.5 second shot cooldown. And while those two bows comparatively are relatively similar, the Juju Shortbow is way cheaper, however the Mosquito Shortbow is marginally better. Well, it's time to upgrade this Mosquito Shortbow. Okay, there we go, it's nothing crazy, but it's relatively similar to what we have on the Terminator. Just one thing we have to consider is that this bow has power 6 and the Terminator has power 7. I'm not putting a 120 mil enchant on the Mosquito Shortbow. Now, comparative to the Terminator, the requirements to actually go ahead and use Mosquito Shortbow or craft the Mosquito Shortbow are relatively low. Spider Slayer 7 is way easier to achieve than, for instance, Slayer 7. If you did go for a Juju Shortbow, it would be Enderman Slayer 5. Yeah. Right, so we're going to go ahead and spec our setup. First of all, definitely outside of dungeons. We'll be using the same armor set for both weapons, and that will be this Terra setup. That is not great at all. It's not really going to matter for the sake of the test because we're going to be using the same armor set. Now, what's good about Terra is that at 10 stacks you shoot plus 2 arrows that deal 30% arrow damage. Meaning that, of course, you're going to be shooting 2 more arrows. So for instance, with Mosquito Shortbow, that would be 3 arrows. The Terminator, fine, that is up to 5. But at least it's more similar to the Terminator in a sense that you are shooting 3 arrows. Now granted, those extra 2 arrows don't deal quite as much damage. But let's see how this pans out. First of all, we're going to be using our Terminator, and then we're going to use our Mosquito Shortbow, then we'll be able to compare. Now, like I said before, we definitely need the Fortuitous Power Stone because we're not going to be able to achieve 100 crit chance otherwise, and that is obviously really important. And as well, we're probably going to have to throw all of our tunings into crit chance as well, just to make sure that we get it. In fact, our crit chance is still only 94, it's not even 100 yet, so we've still got more work to do. Well, we can get 6 crit chance from our beacon, which actually amounts into very little considering that is then divided by 4, so that's only plus 1.5. Yeah, we still only have 95.5 crit chance, so we need 100. I guess this is probably what I'm going to have to do. Oh wow, our crit chance somehow just went down, even though we just gained 37 crit chance. Anyway, let's go and test it. So first of all, we're just going to test what our damage actually is against maybe like hub zombies. And that's going to be around about 440k damage. That's with 10 stacks. Of course, it doesn't really matter too much considering, you know, we're just hitting them with one shot. If we go further away, we were actually able to see the 5 arrows shoot out of our Terminator, which is pretty cool to see. Now, I guess you could start getting more creative with this. Not really more creative, but you could start maybe changing your arrows and stuff like that. Ultimately, if you're going to be using the same arrow with both weapons, I don't see how it can make much of a difference. Obviously, you'll do more damage potentially with both, but that's with both. But we are just using flint arrows at the moment for both weapons. If you are looking for just a way that's a relatively cheap way to get a little bit more out of your weapon, maybe it's your Terminator, maybe it's whatever bow that you've got, of course you can always consider looking at these better arrows. And some of the buffs are actually really quite cool. For instance, like the armor shed arrows are good. I know the bouncy arrows are good at times as well. That's kind of besides the point. Now, if we end up trying our luck against some mobs that have higher health, we can see that the Terminator obviously decimates them, given that it's shooting multiple bullets and these have the equivalent of 3 bullets worth of health. You've also got to consider a massive thing about the Terminator, and that's its left click ability. Of course, it consumes soul flow, but its left click can be cast after landing 3 hits, shoot a beam, penetrating up to 5 enemies. The beam always crits, and of course it is pretty damn devastating. You can see the beam firing and it kind of just wiping everything out. There's something else that I am going to go ahead and test, and I think it might be the most telling test, is against the magma boss, because we'll actually be able to see how quickly we can start to deal damage to this. And we can see our damage bar on the right hand side of our screen. We can kind of gauge how quickly we're killing this boss. Honestly, not really that quickly, to be completely honest. You can definitely kill it way quicker, but we can then at least compare it to the mosquito shortbow and see the difference. But that gives us a bit of an idea there. Anyway, it's time to move on and test the mosquito shortbow. Actually, to be fair, I think I will put some fuming potatoes on there. I forgot to do that. Okay, now we've got our mosquito shortbow in hand. Now, the main thing that we can do that should actually kind of even out the playing field is, of course, change our power stone, because the mosquito shortbow doesn't have anything that reduces its crit chance. You know, we should just be able to achieve 100% crit chance really, really easily, as you usually would be able to. Which means we can take the power stone like Hurtful. That's going to give us way more damage in buffs. It's giving us 218 strength and 873 crit damage at my magical power. Whereas Fortuitous, in terms of damage goals, gives 218 strength and 218 crit damage. That means that we've got around about, give or take, 600, 650 more crit damage using this power stone. Now what we can do is see that we now have more crit damage than strength. So I'm going to attempt to try and even that out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and put all of our shooting points into strength, so we get more of a strength buff, making the difference between our strength and crit damage a little bit less. But anyway, now just testing out our damage, we can see our damage is actually really, really high with the mosquito shortbow. That was kind of conflicting, but we got 630, 609, 930. It does fluctuate quite a lot. That was even less. And of course, testing out our left click ability, that increases our damage even more. We can hit over 1 million damage, which is kind of good. And now heading over to the Crimson Isles, we can still take out all of these mobs with, well, with ease, really. They're not really an issue. I'd say the Terminator probably did seem to clear a little bit faster. And now we're going to go ahead and test against the Magma Boss, which should give us more of an understanding as to where this stands. And here we go. So let's see how quickly we can start to damage the Magma Boss with our Mosquito Bow. It's definitely slower than the Terminator from what you can see. It'd be ideal if I also didn't run into lava. You know, that would be kind of cool too. It's not obviously the worst bow I've ever used. However, it does definitely fall short to the Terminator in damage. Right, well, I'm going to try another phase considering we didn't actually catch it at the start with all of our stacks, so I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. It's still doing decent damage though. You know, this is still dying relatively quickly, I've got to say. But just not quite as fast as the Terminator. I mean, that's obviously to be expected. You know, the caliber of weapons aren't exactly the same. But it can still definitely do the job. Mosquito Shortbow's not a bad weapon at all, considering everything, to be honest. This is a pretty classic example of one-hit damage doesn't always mean better DPS. The Terminator shoots 3 arrows, all at full damage. With the Terra armor, of course, you get the extra 2 arrows as well that deal 30% arrow damage. Which, even if we take the base damage, if you consider that you hit every single shot that you shoot at once, that means that what? You're dealing 360% damage with the Terminator as opposed to 100% damage with the mosquito bow, which means that that base damage has to be ridiculously high to compete. That being said, the whole point of this video is to test out, I guess, a knockoff Terminator setup, and this really is not a bad setup at all. A big thing is both weapons have the same shot cooldown, which is obviously good to see. Another thing to consider as well that I haven't mentioned is the fact that the Terminator gives plus 44% bonus attack speed. So if you're not going to make that attack speed up with the mosquito bow already, then that's something you need to think about. Because of course bonus attack speed is pretty important when it comes down to DPS. I mean, pretty important is very important. But all in all, this bow costs around about 70 to 80 million coins with the upgrades, and this bow costs closer to probably 400-500 mil with the same upgrades. There is quite a big difference. And of course, that's not even the main issue. It's more if you can use the Terminator, and what should you do if you can't. And in all honesty, you could probably still yield relatively similar results with the Juju shortbow, because in actual fact, the stats between the Juju and the mosquito bow aren't massively different. When I've tested in the past, the mosquito bow is a little bit better. Anyway, with that said, I hope you have enjoyed today's video. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.